What are the best performing nations and tanks in War Thunder at BR 4.0? Let's look at actual player data to find out. When analyzing Thunder skill data, which is likely more representative of experienced or serious players, we see that China does better than other nations when it comes to the average tanks destroyed per battle. But this does not mean that China is the best nation at this BR. There's quite a bit of variability here, and this is only one performance metric. So let's also look at the average KDs per nation. But now Germany seems to lead the pack. Of course, China, Italy, US, and Russia also have decent average KDs. What about win rate? The distribution of win rates across all vehicles centers at just below 60%. China's average win rate is a little weaker here, whereas Japan and Russia tend to have the strongest win rates. And there is a decent amount of variability with Japan. But we can go further and use machine learning to also help us identify which nations and tanks are performing the best given current player preferences and trends. Using K-means clustering, we can group all 4.0 vehicles into two performance clusters: high performers and low to moderate performers. Vehicles in the high performance group had significantly higher scores for average win rates, KD, and tanks destroyed per battle. But what is interesting is that the highest performing group had a fairly decent mix of both premium and non-premium vehicles. My last analysis on 6.7 tanks, however, showed that premium vehicles overwhelmingly made up the high performance group. That's not the case here. For BR 4.0, Russian vehicles made up the biggest proportion of the high performance group. Out of the high performers, almost 40% of them were Russian tanks. But that doesn't mean that Russia is necessarily the best nation at this BR. That's because Russia also had a lot more vehicles at this BR compared to other nations. Almost 30% of the 4.0 vehicles included in the analysis were Russian. To put that in perspective, Germany and the US each only contributed around 14%. But a decent proportion of high performing tanks belonged to China, Germany, and the US. So which one of these top performing tanks from our K-means clustering model had the best KD over the past couple of weeks? The analysis showed that the KV-1E, the Calliope, one of my favorite vehicles, the German M4A2 variant, also known as the M4748A, the KV-1B Finland, and the Italian Zerini, not sure if I pronounced it correctly, were some of the most lethal tanks in the high performance group. But let's compare the performance of these tanks over time. Looking at win rates, we see that the Calliope has recently seen the highest win rates relative to the other tanks, but there's a lot of volatility here. This is likely due to a smaller volume of battles. But both the Italian Zerini and the Russian KV-1E also have very strong win rates. However, it's important to remember that win rates also depend on other players and vehicles on your team. So we should also compare the historical trends for KD. The KD trends paint a slightly different picture here. The German M4748A has seen the biggest increase in its KD rates over time. The Calliope also has a strong KD, but once again, there's a lot of variability with the Calliope. What's also interesting is that the German KV-1B Finland has had a consistently strong KD, but this is starting to trend downward. Based on these results, any one of these 5 vehicles will be highly lethal in the right hands. As for nations, Russia, Germany, and the US are all performing very well. China and Italy are also decent contenders. But what is your favorite nation and vehicle at 4.0? Let me know, and I'll see you in my next analysis video.